Thank you guys all for coming today. Really appreciate it. We're excited to show you. You've seen it probably. You've seen it in action. And I just appreciate you guys coming out for it. So, you know, we'll do a brief sort of history of who we are and what we're about and the project overview. And then we'll have some great speakers, Damon and Joshua and Stacy and Daughter here. So thank you for being here, being a part of it. And again, feel free to ask questions at any point. And we'll be in here for a little bit, but we're going to push out as much as we can. The projector just doesn't like the light outside. So we're just going to get started here. So we started this project back in September of 2014, and it probably started a little bit before then even. It's you know, it's been a 3-year process, and it's been there's been challenges, there's been successes, and all sorts of things along the way. But it's we're super excited to have it. It's already serving its purpose right now. And I'm really looking forward to being able to feed over there. You probably all walked in and saw what our old feeding system sort of looked like, and I'm just really excited to have it neat and clean and ready to go. So let's see. So this is sort of, in a nutshell, who we are. We started Yankee Farmers Market in 1998, which is so long ago now. Brian actually started farming buffalo when he was in high school, so he's been doing it for a very long time. Really? He's super old. He's way older than me. We have established a retail store, obviously right over here. And we have an online store. Our main purpose is to provide locally grown, healthy meats. And not only to promote that piece, but also to promote local agriculture. And so we work with a handful of farms with other products as well, from milk to eggs to chicken to, so it's a full gamut. And that's sort of where Yankee Farmers Market came from. Kira Farmer, Brian Farmer, kind of playing off the farmer name, married into that one, sort of had to do it for a living. So that's sort of, we got established really with our concession stand business. And then from there, people were like, where can I buy the meat? And we love the animals, we love the idea, and we love creating healthy products. So we sort of put that all together and jumped in, literally, both feet. Right now, we have this farm here in Warner. We have a farm in Hillsborough that we summer pasture animals at primarily, and then Eli, buddy, he's going to be everybody's best friend because he's a golden. And come on, bud. Here. Come here, buddy.
Yeah, so right now we have the 3 locations. We have the Warner, the Hillsborough, which is Hillsborough, Henniker, and then also in Stoddard. All in all, about 300 acres, I think, is what we have pastured off. About 100 acres of hay land. Yeah, so,
When we took over Pitcher Mountain, what was it, 4 years ago?
6.
I'm going to try more. We took over the herd that was there of Scottish Highland grass-fed beef, and so we've continued to grow those animals over there. They do really well over there. We really like the breed. We do it for beef, and there's such a history to it being over on that piece of property. It's an amazing piece of property that we felt really strongly about continuing to grow those animals out there, and with the eventual plan of bringing buffalo over there. Maybe now that this thing started, we can pasture some animals over there and get over there and put some fencing in. So that's those are our 3 sort of locations. Not ideal, but that we're on 3 different pieces of property. But it is what it is. Yeah. Do you want to speak to this a little bit?
Yeah, so, when we first bought this property, first of all, I have to say, we've always struggled just to provide land underneath the animals, and I think that's always important to say, what is ideal. First, you need a place to start, right? And I think, unfortunately, what we could afford was, a wooded piece of land that was on the side hill, and the location was great, and we, with our business and all that other, and then, part of the reason why this project even, started is because, we live here, and it is, we're heavily invested in being here and keeping it going, and then the additional grazing lands, we're really a grazing operation, and this is, this is not a feedlot, this is really more of a setup for, housing animals when we can't have animals out on pastures and fields, so.
During these times of the year where.
So you'll see like here, because of the winter and, overwintering, there's an awful lot of, you end up having concentrated animals. Even if you have 1,000 acres backdrop, they will still really congregate closest to the food, and they hunker down in one area. So as soon as we could, we get them off that, like in the summer months when the vegetation. But in the meantime, this is what we were dealing with, and this was us still even trying to be proactive about it, but it was still between the amount of water that comes off this property and just the terrain itself, like all the water congregates right where we are right here, so there's a big volume of water. With that said, we have some management programs where, like here, as we develop these nutrients, like we had a place to distribute it, and it wasn't cost effective to actually transport it out, elsewhere. So we ended up, basically really looking at it and trying to, we were worried about getting all this nutrients and water mixed up, and so that's when we really started, saying, hey,
There's gotta be a
really
better
looking
way.
to, most of this audience right here for, guidance. This is out front here. And it was such a balance between, you're trying to keep some trees as a way to, hold soils, but then also, it was impossible really to get any vegetation growing, even without animals on it. So basically the water, all the water used to come right down through this middle, and it, at times, if we had these big 3-inch,
it would look
4-inch
like that.
rains, this was one of the times that it ended up coming and just ripping down through there. You see this here, I knew that like a hurricane was coming and ended up digging a catch basin just to try to hold sediment. But those are some of the things. I think Eli is in the picture.
He likes to be part of the action.
But
You'll see him again.
that was in the process when we started trying to address some of these things.
And I think it's fair to say that this property was a challenge from the start. When we moved in, there was a lot of erosion. There was a lot of running water through here. So it's been an evolution of really trying to streamline where the water flows, how it flows, and try to minimize that nutrient runoff. But we had problems before we sort of even started. And the pasture sort of beyond the corral here, and we'll walk up there, was really bony, very eroded land. And so it's been sort of this process of like you pick a section of your land and you work on that section, then you work on another section. And you picture all of this wooded, at one point, and it's crazy to think it was that long ago, but it's such a slow process, just trying to do that and yet maintain, if that was our main job, that would be one thing, but try to maintain the sustainability in this, in farming and still, do our daily grind here.
A lot of the trees that were on the property really look like cypress trees where the roots all were exposed, and for centuries, basically, it was just tons of water coming off of this hill, and it was amazing how by having us do our operation here, we've built a lot of soils and been able to kind of establish a lot of vegetation, and I believe water quality is increasing dramatically in it, so. But,
So, you know, we had the footprint of the heavy use area, but of course then there's like the reality of everything around it. And so this again is a side hill picture. Before we really even got started there, we started from the road and came up because we didn't want this to cause more problem down there. So this was a project that was started with a big swale and sort of directed flow, but with also a catch basin at the top there. And as you can see, that's sort of the before and after. Much better now. That's why I like pictures.
yeah.
Really easy. So, you know, we got to a point where, okay, we don't want to do this anymore. We never wanted it to look like that, right? Nobody ever wants it to look like that. But how can we best manage? What practices can we use? How can we not only decrease nutrient runoff and, you know, increase the soil productivity, but also to help benefit us as farmers with the animal piece, and growing healthy animals that aren't in those kind of, you know, conditions 3-4 months out of the year. So you know, we started to do a little bit of research as to what can we do for this, how to best build it, where should it go, you know, all the good, the bad, and the ugly. And at the time, and still there's no approved design for Buffalo through the NRCS programming. So we sort of had to look outside of the box and look into the innovative design. And it was great to have the people that we had were such great resources for this. And so it was really a collaborative effort of putting this together and trying to come up with something that not only works for its purpose, but works for Buffalo and works for our property, which is, you know, 3 challenges in itself. So, yeah, we'll keep going here. So, enter Joshua Faulkner. So in the innovative process, you know, there was some research done about innovative ways to create heavy use areas, and you know, that's more your side.
Yeah,
of things.
well, I mean, you know, we've been knowing for a long time there's better ways to do it, more efficient ways to do it, like, but also, you know, a lot of those ways are very permanent, and so we really wanted to make sure that this was where we wanted to do it. This is, you know, economically makes sense, and then also, you know, not big into just concreting everything or paving everything. You know, so, you know, through conversations, you know, we end up learning about the wood chip, you know, process. Yet some of the realities of still being able to, you know, keep the cleanliness, you know, and then you know, basically having the concrete, you can't really get any better than, you know, that for the durability and for the cleanliness and all that, but it's not necessarily the best for the animals as far as you know, them to live on concrete. Like, so with the idea that basically the wood chips kind of is an animal welfare piece, and it, you know, it's also, you know, should become like a byproduct too, like, you know, so that it's, you do have to replace it, but it is something that we can add into our composting and, you know, and manure stuff. But some of the things that, you know, Josh will probably explain, you know, some of the other factors that really would seem like a byproduct, which seems like almost the biggest selling point, was that the chips were also treating any of the water coming off of these versus, you know, other systems where, you know, it's grabbing, you know, nutrients, which, you know, that was really fascinating to me. And you know, we actually live in an area that we have a lot of wood products that are available, but what we're actually lacking at the moment is you know, outlets for these. So there's a lot of loggers and a lot of you know, wood industry that is really looking for an outlet for some of these things. And as a landowner, it's nice to be able to even, you know, say we could go and, you know, chip a, you know, section of property, So, using these chips in the area, is definitely an advantage that I'm really trying to take advantage of. So that's part of the direction of why some of the wood chips. But we're really trying to also figure out how to do this without it being so so stringent on, like a really hard set kind of, like all steel and concrete, and really not have the flexibility to be able to adjust some of these systems. So that's where we end up kind of merging some, the chips, the concrete, the steel, and a lot of wood posts, so that we have some flexibility to change the design and have it a little more modular if we need to add or change the design, because there's really not anything out there like this. So.
One of the best things is to create something that is advantageous across the board, and so the fact that this was a design that could manage some of our problem areas, but also, help in some of these other areas, is, from a farming perspective and from a farmer, is huge. So it's a great thing to have something that you can keep clean, but also it promotes healthy animals and growth of animals. So you're sort of being environmentally sound and using good management practices for your animals and stuff like that. So so we found it, that the mutually beneficial projects like that are the ones that are really going to sustain and be viable for the future.
We're very conscious about, kind of doing the most efficient way, the most productive way, but really, at the end of the day, really also the animal welfare piece is huge. And sometimes those three don't all jive. And I think that's an important, point, that we all have to look at some of these agricultural practices, saying this practice may be the most productive use for the land and for the growth of the animal the fastest, but it may not be the best for the animal. If it had its choice, it probably would do something completely different than what we think that it should be doing.
So just briefly, these are some of the bullet point items of what we're trying to achieve with this. Obviously, the improved water quality is kind of, you saw the water quality before, so the cleanable surfaces, able to house and harvest the manure and put it back out to the pastures. Reducing stress for the animals is huge. Buffalo are really interesting animals in the sense that there's such a strong pecking order that the ones on the bottom of the tiers often don't eat. If they're eating the dregs of the of the hay that fell out of the feeder that's been pooped on and laid on. And so having a place where all animals can eat is huge. It's going to be, they'll establish where they eat and who they eat next to on this feed rail. And so I'm excited for that purpose, because that will just completely reduce the stress of those, particularly those in need of a little extra. So I think that's a biggie. Minimizing feed waste is a biggie. If you go out and you look, we probably waste 30% of our hay, just overflow, and half the time the animals jump in the hay, the hay feeder, and they're laying there, and it's you're like, oh, aren't you comfy? And Brian's time in feeding will go down quite a bit, and cleanup. The only thing that probably will be less is that we'll have less compost, just because we have less hay in it now. But that's okay, and it really has, we manage it in this footprint, and then we're allowed to kind of put the vegetative buffers out. If we didn't have something to sort of house them during those the spring months, they're out and they're digging up, what the pastures look like in the spring when there's too many animals and not enough space. So the idea is, to really fixate on those times where the runoff is big, the ground's still sort of frozen, you know, you sort of use that system as a way to feed out during those months, and maybe a little more loosely during the other months, when there's more vegetation. This is sort of, you know, kind of what our goals are, and, you know, my real goals are to be great in all of those things. But, you know, so better management of manure, better management of nutrients in soils, minimize time and waste cleanup, minimize groundwater, and standing water, which has already happened, decrease feed waste, increase productivity, buffalo, increase herd health. So, you know, like I said, I'm really shooting for great on all of those, and I think we can get there too. But it's an evolution, as you all know. Here's some of our key players, and we certainly thank them. Yeah, exactly. This definitely could not have happened without them and their expertise, their advice, their you know, all of their experience, and so we're super appreciative that we have that great support staff.
And I have to say, like,
such a pleasure to work with everybody.
yeah, I mean, there's a very large group of people, like, above and beyond this, including, like, our friends and family, which have been instrumental. You know, from cooking muffins,
banana chip muffins,
watching kids and doing, you know, flipping burgers. You know, there's an awful lot of that, and it goes to our employees who are family too. So.
Yeah. Can I ask a couple questions?
Oh, sure.
Yeah, sure.
Is this heavy use area large enough to keep all of the stock you have here over the winter?
It's really designed, like, you know, basically for about 30 some odd adult animals, you know, for, like, if they were locked in there, like, you know, but, you know, as far as, you know, temporarily, like, it could house a lot, like, so, you know, it's one of those balances. It's not, it doesn't meet all of our needs, but it basically is addressing, you know, it basically, we got the most out of the space that we had. Is really was our kind of our challenge, and even that, like, we squeezed, and you're trying to balance. You know, we lost a lot because we were also making sure that we had enough vegetated treatment, which probably still is never enough. Yeah, so that's one of the challenges of, you know, having it and then only having it set up for really a certain amount of management piece.
So related to that question,
Yep.
what is actually your herd size?
Like, we generally are probably 40 to 60 head, and then
That's a good portion of your herd.
so
It
it's
is,
it's
yeah.
a good portion.
And they're varying sizes too, so 30 adults, you know, you could have probably twice as many young
Yeah.
ones too, so.
50, 60.
Yeah, and then, you know, you know, the other locations, you know, we're hoping to probably you know, use some of that infrastructure too. But again, like, we tend to have more of our project animals here, or the animals that maybe if the stocking, you know, is too dense on the fields, because we're really a grazing program, so we want to, you know, we'll pull animals off the other properties if they have too many on the property, and then we'll have to keep them here, you know, particularly during that mud season. So.
So this is just sort of an aerial view, and you can see the square section there, with our barn, and this was the original plan.
Yeah, so, and I'll speak to this a little bit because, again, this kind of leads into that question. Originally, you know, it's almost the same design, except we ended up doing 3 all in one straight feeding, but we had originally had it set up for, so I had one center feeding alley, so then when I'm going down, I'm putting feed on either side of that, and basically this right here would be where all the vegetative treatment area is. So after talking and getting some advice, they're like, yeah, no.
I'm not gonna send it over the hill.
Yeah, so
actually,
That's-
this is how it got modified.
Yeah,
So
we-
it's one, you know, and obviously you guys probably saw it out there, it's one strip. We had a really hard time fitting it between property lines and then just, you know, where to put it on the property. We could put it somewhere else, but is that a viable location in the winter? You have, you know, as you're feeding animals up in the, you know. So this seemed like a real logical spot to put it,
Yeah.
yeah,
But-
it definitely didn't come without some
Yeah,
challenges
I mean, between
there.
logistics of utilities and all that other, and then also the housing, but also we did, you know, some samplings, like test pits and stuff like that, and, you know, ended up finding that this was really the best. The other areas were really wet and, causing more issues, and some of it was not even financially feasible, because we would have to put a super highway in to get to it, like, so it was opening up a bigger can of worms, so, you know, that's where it ended up.
And this is just sort of a couple slides, of how it works and that there is drainage under all of it. And I'm just gonna kind of go through some of that. I think Joshua will speak to that a little bit more. So this is, you know, this is sort of, we started in the fall of 2014, but we sort of just got all our ducks in a row, and got ready to really start the project, in the spring of 2015. Spring's tough, because it's wet. So we'll just kind of scroll through this. I have, you can't really see it, but that's a giant rock right there. You know, it definitely is the granite state. We spent a lot of time and effort in excavation, of this site. There's a lot of bony, rocky.
There's a lot of digging and a lot of material handling out there. But the big thing is we're doing this project out here, but we had issues above it and below it, which really wasn't part of this project, except it was, had to be addressed. Like, so that's where, you know, we end up trying to, you know, get the water coming from above to be, you know, not coming directly into this, and while we have, you know, ground disturbed, and, you know, so we were constantly dancing with, you know, basically dealing with this, plus, you know, doing our daily, you know, chores and trying to earn a living, like, so yeah, that was kind of a dance. So you would do an area, try to get some vegetation into it, make sure the water wasn't coming into it, and then also not disturb soils too bad, like, and sometimes you have to just get off of it and let it set and try to get
That
established.
brings us to the summer.
So,
And we got, you know, we had to get some heavy equipment in here. We took some trees out, we took some stumps out. We had a local contractor come in and with his excavator and bulldozer and had him grade it and do some of the sort of the site prep. And this is just it sort of graded, and we've got somebody over there painting panels. So as we're grading and doing all of that stuff, we're also doing some of the other pieces to it, so it's not just a hurry up and wait.
speaking on the panel real quick, like, you know, we had looked at doing, you know, buying something out of the box, like out west, like, which was the really only place we could find anything. And by the time we, you know, did it, like, we ended up saying, you know, let's have them fabricated locally. And so all that is stuff that we had designed and had fabricated here in Katuka at, you know, Skytrans, which they generally make. They used to make amusement rides and also but now they do chairlifts, and they took on.
They were awesome.
They took on the task.
Yeah,
and
it was great.
but they weren't so excited about painting.
Yeah. Okay, so some of our challenges, you know, lots of water, hard to set those posts, but as you can see, we're putting drainage in there, so it's a non-issue. Eli, you know, being Eli, and then, you know, our little cow Norman, just, you need to help out over there. Obviously, equipment issues, you know, your water issues.
Yeah, I see. Here,
There's some-
through that picture of me in there.
Here's some rock issues that all came out of that site, so, you know, and you'll see it as you walk out there. There's a lot of rock. a lot of big rock. And then, you know, we had this, right, because we're in New England, so there's a time at which this is a dormant period of production, and it was snowy and it was cold, and so, you know, those are some of them. You know, but Eli was able to live, and he's such a goofball. He's such a golden retriever. So, you know, we sort of did what we could do, but even this is a perfect example of like, okay, we did what we could
So
do,
you'll
but now we're
see-
dealing with water again.
You see this is all ponding, but like what, and there's no concrete or anything, but we did this on purpose. One, we wanted to get the set, you know, basically the post like set, that material out there is so hard. It's great material, but and once it's set up, it sets up like concrete, but it also moves a lot, like, and then, so we really wanted to make sure to get it in as much as we could do, like a lot of key posts and all that, and let things settle, and, you know, before we put concrete down and do all the utilities. But we also wanted to rough that in, and because we wanted, again, to let it set. But we also didn't want all the spring runoff coming through this area, so we end up digging that all deep and use it more or less as a catch basin initially, just to hold the material. And we never spilled out of that, which was, you know, a blessing. It had its challenges when I had to finally like relieve it, because I didn't want to, you know, send it down over the hill, like, you know, so that was a gradual thing. But then we got into there, and we were able to set all the different forms. We talked to the concrete guys, which they were great. A lot of material, a lot of stone. I love stone. Like, of course, they sell stone, so they loved it too. So
No, you need more stone. That's what you need.
we
More
thought it was.
concrete.
I thought it was gonna be an easy pour, you know, just flat and, you know, like, but there's a lot of pitches, a lot going on, and then we were, after talking to the owner and some of their chief guys, like, we did it all in one pour, like monolithic, from, with 3 sections. So each one of those sections is a separate pour. Basically, they would pour into the, into the form, into the wall here, and these are different heights, as you'll see out there. And then, and float that whole section all at the same time, so then, you know, there's no seams, so water can get down in there and split it and separate it. A lot of rebar, a lot of wire, but, you know, and there's pitches. This is on the outside, so that pitches into the vegetative area, and this is pitched into the treatment chip area. But you'll see, like, this is 2 sections, I think. Maybe it's 3. But you'll see the color of the difference just between one set and then, of course, there's all utilities, you know, throughout it for the waters, so there's automatic water. And then we also, while we were in there, we ran electric, so at some point, we, you know, might want to do lights and stuff like that.
So if we
which-
keep talking and it becomes a little dark out, we can put the light
Yeah.
up the door at night.
But I mean, you know, some of the future projects, like, you know, Dodd and I have talked about maybe even daylighting, which is huge in the Buffalo, like, so part of our, you know, something down the line, like, you know, with actually lighting that, extending their day a little bit, like, and it's also nice, you know, when we're out there at 2 o'clock in the morning wondering what's going on, like, flip on light.
Question.
Yes.
How did you decide how much higher to make the feed table than with the?
So I used I think John Porter and Stan Weeks. They had some somewhat generic feed rail designs. So I used that and modified it a little bit.
So do you think you came out, they look comfortable eating?
Yeah, I mean, for a first go and not knowing, I mean, and of course they're, you know, last night was the first night, and we have it open right now so that they don't feel locked in and they can kinda float around through there. They'll change at different times. And then also we're trying to do it so it, really only for that period of time where we will use it, but to have them be able to go back out if there's vegetation, you know, or even frozen ground, we'll have them try to distribute like that elsewhere.
And I noticed the brackets had 3 different holes on them.
Yeah,
Maybe we
so-
can change that.
Yeah, so basically, and again, like, you know, it's possible that we'll see that, there's a new calf out there that's might walk by us any moment.
That would be just about right.
Just let me know, we're back in, like, but basically, yeah, I mean, I was talking about these different for the rail, and I'm thinking that, you know, one, we put them on the side, so that way we could actually change that and have that flexibility. And some of that is, it's really dead simple, but there's a lot of thought into just saying like, well, if it's, you know, permanently welded to a post or whatever, then, you know, it's really hard to have that flexibility. So we've done that, try to keep it simple, but it's, have some flexibility. And then also, we weren't sure too, if we had to raise that height. I had kept that design to the lower side of it, with the idea like that maybe we end up just putting like a plank or, you know, like a some kind of wood structure on there to bring that up if, you know. So I had actually kept the concrete spec off of that design to the low side, with the idea that I could just add wood that's might actually be a little more comfortable for them.
Yeah, plus I think it would protect the concrete just from them shoving their heads through
So-
over time and whatnot.
But we'll see, and then each, you know, and it's set up too that each pen would probably be, you know, could be at different heights. So,
And, are you gonna be feeding silage or something on there too, or just hay?
probably baleage,
Silage?
yeah. I was experimenting last year with processed baleage, which is, you know, basically the, you know, the hay that's cut up really fine.
Oh, yeah.
But terrible for feeders, like the old style feeders, because it really just falls apart and it's like.
Hay waves go through about 8 feet.
Yeah,
up.
I mean, the animals love it,
Yes, nice
but
feeding.
it was a huge, you know, huge cost of the learning curve there. But it would be phenomenal for out here because we're trying to, not necessarily get into mixer wagons and all that, like, for that. So we have some learning on how to, you know, feed in more of that setting. So, yeah. So here you'll see, you know, you basically, this is where the wood chips are, with the perforated drainage running down through there. A lot of stone, and it's dug, you know, extra deep right here in the trough. And in order to get enough pitch, it ends up going down over 120 feet. Like it has to be pretty deep. So without it becoming a giant gully, we end up kind of, you know, trying to keep that similar slope, and then a harder dig in here with extra stone, so it also allows for some sediment to settle down below without filling that up. And then clean outs on basically any of the beginning or ends, or like a turn, so that way you can flush it out. And really, I think, you know, we did double just because, you know, pipe is cheap at that point, and if in case one fails, like it just will handle more volume. So this here is actually, you'll see 3 pipes, because there's, on the high side of this, we're worried about clean water coming down through, and basically even water table, like if it comes up, it was kind of to protect, to make sure that area didn't get saturated from clean water. So we end up having along the feed, on the outside rail, down an alleyway, like we end up putting, you know, more pipe and keeping that down. And then it actually comes out, and it's steady. We were checking out this morning, it's trickling like just, but it's doesn't go into our treated area, it goes into a different area, so we're not mixing the two.
This is on the uphill side, this drainage?
So yeah,
Yes.
so basically where the backhoe is an alleyway, like up on that, like, and the third pipe is for that, for groundwater. Yeah, so like, there's, the two are actually come down into this vegetative treatment, and this is before, in order to, because we're doing such a long run, you know, and doing pitches, it became really deep. So you'll see, you know, we were, had done that into that vegetative treatment, and, you know, we're, and then basically comes out into an area where it is, hopefully gonna be vegetated. I see some of the grass is starting to, you know, pop, but I just did it last week. And then we had shaped it too, like, so that way, surface water, it also ends up in there off of that area. Obviously that looks a lot different.
Yeah.
So this is a, the chips showing up, coming from Henniker. So, we're able to get, you know, truck right in there, and, we end up dumping them all around.
Was there any specific kind of chip, hardwood chip, softwood, any?
So
particular-
there's some studies on what's best, but I think the answer, and, you know, probably Josh might talk a little bit more about it, is, no one for sure knows, and then of course it's, you know, regional, so, you know.
I guess hardwood lasts longer, but it's way more expensive.
Well, yeah, and I'm not sure that's actually the case or not too, like, and then interestingly, I was just talking to some 4-H'ers who had used, you know, chips in their barnyard and in their, areas, and they're like, we will never use hardwood chips again, because it stained all the animal coats, which was kind of, you know, and I was just a 4-H'er, like,
Never
a, you know, a 14-year-old kid telling me this, like, you know, and, you know, and so we end up getting those in, and we just happened to be this way, but the first load was all like, super clean, pine chips, 100% pine. So the first batch of them, which brought it up most of the way, was all like, you know, white pine. Which in my experience, if white pine stays wet, it seems to last forever, like, and then the second load, we end up getting a top dressing of, just all hemlock. So it should be interesting to see. Oh, it's, and where do you get these pictures?
I gotta show who really does the work, then, not you, buddy. This was just the, you know, obviously, all that green that you saw earlier, in the earlier slides, got all ripped up so that we can grade it properly, and by we, I mean this one.
Did you use any geotextile underneath that?
None, no. So, and, you know, we talked about putting it between, well, first on the bottom, but like I said, that sets up so hard, it's like concrete, that we avoided the cloth play. And then I always thought maybe between the chips and that, but that, it was said not to do that either. So, no, so, but a lot of stone, because of the actual pitch of the pipe ended up being, so deep, so we have a lot of stone in there, you know, so anywhere from, you know, probably, 18 inches to start to almost 3 feet by, plus making that level across, and then having a whole layer of, chips, and the chips, you also taper a little bit, like, but.
How deep are the chips?
So the chips are probably anywhere from, 16 to 20, 24 inches or something.
Sort of an animal tested in a very, very finite amount of time.
You know, and there's some things too, like, you know, a lot of the details that are hidden, like on the concrete with the thickened edges, and, you know, so when we do have to replace the chips. You have a hard edge to clean out against, and then also it should stabilize that concrete pad more too, like, again, just at the edges.
Pretty much brings us to last night. You know, once again, thank you for everybody that had a part of this. Thank you for coming and thank you for hearing about it. Certainly, if we can share any of our experience with you guys, please don't hesitate to ask.
Brian and Kara, could you go back to the beginning when you was in college and tell
Wow, how long do you guys
tell
have?
what you were studying and how you wanted to raise?
Sure. Go ahead, Brian.
Well, I guess I'll start because
How you
I
started
started with a friend that had done his senior thesis of raising buffalo in the East Coast at UNH. He was older. He was finished up college. He grew up on a dairy farm, and you know, he got an A on his paper. And we were kind of like, "What good is it if you don't actually try it?" So we ended up getting some animals. And while I was in high school, he owned the animals, and then I was just a labor. And then we ended
Head
up.
burger flipper.
Yeah, before we even had the animals, like we had people looking for the meat, and we ended up selling every animal before we even had them yet. Like so, and then we basically you kind of rolled, you know, through college that way, and you. About the time I was finishing up college, I went to I went to NHTI and got an associate's degree in engineering, and then and then continued on at UNH and finished up there for engineering. But the buffalo, we ended up doing the buffalo thing, the whole way through, along with grocery stores and mowing lawns and running forklift and a lot of different jobs. And Kira and I met in college 2 days before we graduated, and she helped me kind of put the professional edge on. But and then
Yeah, my background's in kinesiology and athletic training, so not at all related. Always thought I wanted to have a farm. Didn't realize I would marry a farmer. I went to work for a marketing company right out of college, and it was a really young marketing company, and I thought, hey, if these guys can do it, why don't we start our own business? And sort of the rest was history. Sold our first car for 5 buffalo, which my parents completely appreciated, thought we were nuts, but it makes for a good story now, 20 years later. It's just sort of been an evolution since, and back then, not many people had buffalo meat. Everybody sort of came, and it's really why the concession stand business started, just to get the product into people's hands. Everybody sort of attributing buffalo to chicken. And so there was a whole educational process that happened, as far as, that it's not this completely horrid exotic product, and that it actually is incredibly healthy for you, really not tampered with. There's no genetic modification, and they're raised out on pastures the way that I think that animals should be raised, and so we sort of just fell into that piece, and we've been doing it ever since. And for 10 years, or I don't know how, 5 years, we probably toggled between all sorts of different things. He continued his engineering. We did some event stuff and whatnot, but we sort of just have developed this and continue to try to get better with each thing that we do. But one of our real visions and missions of what we do is to not only raise buffalo and have a farm, is to create a really healthy product. And I think that I'm sort of in the business of creating health through food, is how I see it. So it's also farming, and I love that piece of it. But it's really about creating healthy products, because we're starting to tamper with our products too much now, and I think the swing of the pendulum's in the wrong direction. So local ag can bring that back. And then one of our other missions is to also network with local farms and promote sustainability in agriculture and promote other local farms in a way that, you know, not everybody can have a retail store on their farm and not everybody can do that. But if we work together, we can all feed the masses good quality, healthy products. So that's really sort of the mission and vision of what we do, and just get better doing it, more efficient doing it, more productive, and yeah. And so this is a great step towards that. It's a huge step towards that, and I'm excited to get those animals out there and feed them out there and sit out there, and you know, and now focus on the next project. Always a project. Yeah, never a dull moment. Nope. So, does anybody have any questions? Now that we've taken up way too much of your
Yeah.
time.
Could I just ask you a little bit more about the operational piece? Basically, you're using the head use area during all of the winter months or part of the winter months? Are they confined there?
I mean, I think the answer is we're not sure yet.
Okay.
But I think what I'm picturing is they're not locked into that section while they, but they probably have access to it. Any animals that we're feeding will probably use that. But then be able to, if there's vegetation or frozen ground, we'll probably let them out and let them distribute and loaf in different areas. But then when it becomes muddy or damaging of the ground, I think that's when they get locked in
Or
there.
when there's 6 feet of snow or something?
Yeah, I mean, and at that point they don't even bother. Like, there's no reason to.
And so you talk about it, you refer to it as housing. Do you have any other housing or shelter? Or is that it basically because of being buffaloes, they don't need?
Yeah, no shelter. No, yeah. And in the past, we've had a shelter available, and they go in, and it wasn't like they were leery of going into it, but they would. The first place that we started off was in New Boston, and they had access to go in there and loaf inside, and huge barn. What they did was just make a mess in there, a lot of wear and tear on the barn, and a lot of extra cost. And they'd go in, make a mess, and then go back out in the field, and it could be 20 below, and or the other extreme, 100 degrees, sweltering hot, and you'd be right out in the middle of the field, and most of the time what I find is that a lot of the animals will prefer to be out, and they're probably healthier because of it. But what it does is it's not as economical to grow an animal, because a lot of that energy is that they're eating is just going into maintaining, versus growing. And so I think it's more of a financial thing to keep them in the shelter.
Well, from the NRCS perspective, or I think from maybe some other perspectives also, the idea is that you can keep them in that one area that's managed for the heavy use, then you'll be protecting other areas.
Yeah.
Also.
Right.
Yes.
But if they're allowed to go anywhere they want,
Yeah.
then you can just
Yeah.
leave.
No, they'll definitely be managed and where they can do
Right.
it and the timing of it.
Yeah.
But that's but right now, where a lot of stuff is, it would be grazed down, and the basically the growing season is kind of dormant at the moment. It is probably just on some heavier loafing areas, but and then flash
Yeah, I
grazing.
think timing is really,
So-
when the pastures start to deteriorate, that's when you start to say, yeah, it's time to bring them
Yeah.
in. And otherwise, we just use them as, manure dispersal, and it's less work. But yeah, and I think that what's great about this is we're really still in the infancy period of it now, and now it's, now, oh my gosh, it sounds like a friendly golden right now. I know, it's Cujo. So I think that it's sort of a tweaking along the way. What works, what doesn't work, the one thing about buffalo is they do not love to be locked in areas for any period of time, and certainly in areas that they're not used to, which is why it's so key to have them be able to come in and out, and it's why we set it up like it is today. They don't want to be separated, and they don't want to be locked in. They're still sort of, they've got that fight or flight, and it's also why the panels are as beefy as they are.
But again, ideally, everything's just out grazing like at this time of the year, so it's really those challenging, months, so.
And I'll jump into a little bit, and David, you might talk about this, but one of the reasons why this was a difficult project for us to fund in the NRCS is because buffalo are unique, and we don't typically design, and our standards aren't built around buffalo. So this was a nice innovation grant idea because we could buy a little flexibility and let you experiment and see what works and what doesn't, and learn from that as we, hopefully are able to help other people with buffalo, but I think help, anyone that has confined animals like beef cattle. This type of design really intrigues us.
Okay.
Is this, are you thinking that you might have to add chips mid-year, or, I know you don't know yet, but.
Yeah, I mean, probably Josh will talk about that, but I would say, I think the answer is, probably, at least once a year, you're scraping it and taking care of that. And then I think it's projected maybe 5 to 7 years that you have to do it complete. Even though the chips may not even be broken down completely, but they may be done doing their, filtration.
Has your property assessment changed at all?
I hope not. If anything, I'm sure it's just devalued. But,
Mark, you mentioned byproducts of the chips and stuff. Have you figured any of that out yet?
well, I mean, I think it's going to be shockingly how much that we're wasting of feed. So we're going to lose that, byproduct of compost. But the quality of it, I mean, the compost that we have, I mean, a lot of times some stuff up small stumps or rocks or, so if you put it in the garden, most people aren't too keen on getting more rocks in their garden, but, those are some of the things too, and then, kind of working with our nutrient management plan, it really just didn't seem feasible to, haul any of this stuff out, so either export it directly to a consumer, or you any system like this where you're collecting it, at least you have a place to lose it, out here, and build soil. So versus if you took it on a really prime piece of property, sometimes you can overdo it. And, but any other questions? All right, and then I'm not sure who is the next.
I think Josh.
Josh?
Joshua wants to come up and speak to some
Yeah,
of
that'd
those
be great.
particulars. That would be.
Okay. Pictures. Great. Okay. Lori.
Right.
Okay, so I'll, if I can get things loaded, I'll be pretty quick, and then I think what might be fun is just to get us outside and we can do some Q&A and discussion and kind of do a lot of the morning like that. But I do have a handout that talks just about wood chip pads in general, not about this specific project, but it's a little fact sheet we put together. We've been having some had a workshop on a wood chip pad in Vermont this summer and put this together for that, and it talks about some of the details. Let's see, I don't know what's happening here. Let me try again. Oh boy. that I have some pictures of other wood chip pads that have been built, and just some of the schematics on typical design, and a little bit of the background as well. And I think that, so just to give you the kind of a little bit of background on this project, how this evolved, or how I got involved with it is, I was in West Virginia, working for West Virginia University Extension for a while, and working on this concept, and then came to Vermont about 4.5 years ago, and was at a meeting with Damon and in New Hampshire, and did a little talk on wood chip pads, and he was with UNH Extension at that point, and he was working with Brian, I think, at that time. And ended up thinking this was a good option for a site with challenges like this, with water challenges, and it's been just fantastic working with UNH Extension and NRCS here in New Hampshire. So we may just go outside.
I have no idea.
Yeah, so.
Not my area of expertise.
Yeah, and if it doesn't work, that's fine, but, and maybe we'll
Just
get,
his thumb drive.
yeah, just trying to get the thumb drive loaded. So this is the 5th wood chip pad that we know of built in the country. All the others that have been built for beef cattle, and, well, one has been built for dry cows and heifers on a dairy research farm at West Virginia University. It's a concept that I didn't come up with, we didn't come up with here in the States. It's been used in Ireland and Scotland and New Zealand for years. In Scotland, it's used for sheep and for beef cattle. In Ireland, it's used on a lot of dairy farms, and in New Zealand, it's used on dairy farms. And typically, it's not something you would stock your dairy in a dairy situation. It's not something you would stock your cattle on continuously, especially lactating cattle, just because of the consistency of the manure, very liquid-like, and the amount of manure it could end up clogging these. But for dry cows, for heifers in a dairy situation, it works really well, and for beef cattle, it has worked really well. There's been some great research that shows that for beef cattle, it does improve weight gain compared to indoor housing, slat floor housing. So that's I think as far as when we go and talk to farmers about this, that's really what gets people interested, is that they don't want to put their cattle on concrete. They're concerned about, how comfortable their cows will be, the herd health, and when they see that herd health and cow comfort reflected in weight gain, I think that's a really good proxy for kind of showing how this can improve an animal's well-being.
If you want to head outside, I have another computer, I can set that up.
Okay.
And then,
yeah,
in
that's
my,
fine, or we can just talk out there, yeah. I mean, I just
like
have
a
a
white
selection of pictures from other pads, just to show you the diversity of systems that have been built. And
So
yeah.
not all of them are built in conjunction with a feed rail.
That's right. This is actually the first one that is built like this, and this is what most farmers, I think, want to do, especially if they don't have a place to feed their cattle already. We do recommend that you don't feed on the wood chips themselves, because about 2/3 of manure is deposited where an animal eats, and if you have all that manure on the wood chips, it'll degrade the wood chips quicker, it'll clog up, it'll get muckier quicker. So if you have some sort of hard surface off of the wood chips, that's preferable. We've seen them built off the front of NRCS roofed winter feeding structures, which they build a lot of in West Virginia. Really a fantastic system for small, oh, here we go, perfect. For small beef producers. So let me just, so yeah, I won't talk about this, why we are interested in wood chip pads, really to protect pastures, and to collect nutrients. a lot of folks don't like concrete. Cost is also another concern when you start thinking about concrete and the permanence of it. These have been used in other countries, again, not our original idea. Here's some of the data on, I can't quite yell, thank you. Yeah, so here's wood chip pads compared to different other types of winter holding systems, and shows live feed intake differences, live weight gain, and carcass gain. So for live weight gain, we see some pretty big differences compared to just a slat barn over here. And again, just to echo what Brian said, animals and Kara, animals like to be outside. And I think this just shows up in this data too when you compare a slat barn with outdoor access versus a slat barn.
So is this from Europe then?
This is from Europe, yeah. So we don't see a lot of slat barns here, but we do see indoor winter housing. Here's the section profile. So typically we would excavate down 2 feet, shape the subgrade in a ridge and valley type design. And this just encourages drainage, good drainage. And then in those valleys, if you will, put a perforated pipe and then drainage stone on top of that for a 12-inch depth on top of the ridge in that subgrade. And then you get another few inches on top of that pipe, which is down in the valley, and that prevents crushing because you will have heavy equipment on this, on top of this drainage stone. And then really what we've done in the past, most of the systems have just been 10 to 12 inches of wood chips, where this one's much thicker. And it's really a cost question because the chips do cost money. And this is what's been recommended. This is what's in the literature from Europe to have about a 10 to 12 inch thickness. So we've stuck with that. And on a chip pad that's more square than it is long, like this one, we would have lateral drainage pipes that all connect to a main drainage pipe and then take the water out, get it away from the pad that way. Whereas if you have a long narrow system like this, you don't need that main pipe. You can just run your tile down the middle of that pad. And here's a picture of the subgrade. I'm just going to probably just click through some pictures now. That's that ridge and valley design I talked about. And this one was one that was adjacent to, this is that NRCS roofed winter feeding structure. The first one of these we built on a very adventurous farmer's piece of land in West Virginia for something that had never ever been done before. Another image, kind of a little tough to see, but again, that ridge and valley design in the subgrade. This is a pad in Charlotte, Vermont, that went in this past, actually, he's been through one winter on this pad, and this is showing the excavation, and this was off the front of a bedded pack barn, a brand new bedded pack barn that they had constructed. And again, about a 20 to 24 inch excavation on this down the subgrade. And then you can see where they've designed the ridge and valley subgrade with drainage pipe covered by gravel. And then clean outs there at the end where you turn the pipe up so that if you ever do get clogging, you can jet those out and get solids out of the pipe. We typically do try to ensure that there is an adequate clay content in the subgrade so that you're not contaminating groundwater. And definitely, if there is clay or if it's a really permeable soil, we'd want to actually put in a liner of some sort. We haven't had to do that yet, but for that subgrade, we'd want to compact that so that we ensure it's a nice tight seal so that we don't get leakage and all of our dirty water is making it into our drainage system. This is on the WV, West Virginia University Animal Science Research Farm. This was a fairly large pad, about 200 feet by 75 feet. And it's divided up into 3 separate cells for 3 different animal groups. This is again a 2 inch or about a 2 foot excavation. these aren't showing up real well, but drainage stone, just showing drainage stone going in on these with, and geotextile. Brown said his subgrade packed down really well. In some cases, that's not what's happened. What has happened. So we have put geotextile under the gravel, under the drainage stone, just to increase the bearing strength of the soil, and we don't lose all our gravel into the earth. This is another pad in Waitsfield, Vermont, that went in. Again, he's been through one winter on this pad, and this structure up here is where he feeds, and then there's an alleyway where the cattle can come down and loaf on this pad. And this is a herd of Scottish Highland mixed with British Whites, and in the winter time, you know, we had a pretty decent winter this year, and you drive by there in the winter and those cattle would just be as windy and as cold as it was, they'd be out there just laying on this pad when they did have access to cover and windbreak, which I think was really encouraging. This pad drained exceptionally well, stayed firm but soft and comfortable for the cattle. Really, I'm happy with the way this one turned out. If you're ever in Vermont, in the Mad River Valley, Route 100, through Waitsfield, Vermont, this sits right beside the main road, so you can actually see this one if you're up that way. This is, again, the pad in Charlotte, drainage stone going in. They did a little bit of compaction on that stone. I think that's all we're really seeing in that one. I'll just talk about this. The type of wood chip you use does matter. You really want to use something like is out here. We'll go and hopefully be able to pick that up and take a look. But it's typically what we've recommended in terms of what the mills make in New England is a bowl chip or a heating chip. So it's a chip that schools are burning, different facilities are burning for heat. And it's a chip that meets certain specs, so it's had the fines screened out of it so that it doesn't clog up when you put it out there and go through a couple winters with it. It's about the biggest chip that you can find that is typically produced by some of the lumber mills. In some places in Europe, they do use a bigger chip. It's like a conical type chip, but they actually think it's not very comfortable for the cattle, and if you use much of a smaller chip, you get more clogging. So I think we're really lucky where we were able to access this type of chip, which seems to be the sweet spot for chip size. Hardwood versus softwood chips. We've done some work in the lab with comparing white oak versus in West Virginia, where white oak was a dominant species that we could get a hold of, versus softwoods. And we've seen different levels of pollutant treatment from the two types of wood. Primarily, we think that the hardwood's going to last longer, but that the softwood is going to absorb more water, which is a really good thing if you're talking about trying to reduce the amount of dirty water you have to deal with in your drainage. And that's where I think some of the one of the big advantages to these systems are, if you compare it to concrete, where a lot of the rainfall on concrete runs off, then you have a lot of dirty water you have to handle and treat. Where with the wood chip pads, we see about half as much water because those wood chips are soaking up the water and then evaporating. So I think that's a huge advantage of these. And in different places, we've handled dirty water different ways. This is in Waitsfield again, and we built the state helped fund this one, and they insisted we're right on the banks of a waterway in the Champlain watershed, which has a TMDL, and they required us to catch this, partially because this was the first one that went in Vermont. Really innovative. They don't know what's coming out of this, so they said, you know, let's go ahead and build a waste storage pond to catch that water, and we hope to be able to do some more research on this effluent to show that the pollutant level is fairly low. Again, we've done some work looking at runoff, about half as much runoff as concrete. And we've also found very low concentrations that are, if you look at the literature of feedlot runoff, and this is not a feedlot in any way, but if you look at the concentrations of folks who've studied runoff from lots like this, we're at the very, very low end of concentrations. And some work from I think these French and Hickey, these guys are from Ireland, where they think about 90 to 95% of the nitrogen and phosphorus gets bound up in the wood chips. So pretty encouraging stuff. Here's just some pictures of some finished pads. This one's in the first one we built, again adjacent to a NRCS roofed winter feeding structure. This is at the WVU Animal Science farm. We're actually doing these small pipes are experimental. We're actually doing some smaller plots within that system to look at how different types of wood chips handle pollutants. But this was, yeah, again, the biggest pad we've built by far. Heaping, I actually am showing this to show that before we put this in, there was not a gutter on the side of this barn, so all this clean water came onto the wood chip pad. And I think they've done a great job of cutting off all that upslope water so that you don't have clean water coming in, becoming dirty, and then you have to deal with all that extra water. So that's really important if you're thinking about putting one of these in. This is the pad in Waitsfield. I have a few pictures in that fact sheet as well. Again, and this is the one in Charlotte. He fed on this intermittently through the winter. I think it did okay even with that intermittent feeding. He's already scraped off wood chips the top 3 inches or so this summer, and he got below that 3 inches, and the wood chips looked like they were fresh from the mill. They were just, all the manure solids stayed in that upper layer in the wood chips. It was really incredible, even with feeding on this chip pad. But still, we recommend keeping them off of that pad for feeding. It's the waste hay that really will clog up these chip pads too. So someone asked about replenishment of chips. We recommend every fall scrape off the top 3 to 4 inches wherever you see that kind of soiled layer stopping. Kind of pull that off with manure and then compost that and field apply, and then replenish, top dress with some fresh chips before you go into your next winter stocking season. And so there is an annual cost with these. That's important for I think producers to know going in that you got to be a good manager. You got to stay on top of it. You don't have to daily scrape or weekly scrape like you would manure, but once, maybe twice in the winter, you're going to want to go in and take off some dirty chips. I won't get bogged down in this, but there's been some research on how using the wood chips on hayland after you've composted them, and essentially they seem to, if you apply the chips at 143 pounds of nitrogen per acre, it has the same forage growth as synthetic nitrogen if you went and bought fertilizer in at 54 pounds to the acre. So there is fertilizer value. We don't think that the carbon in the wood chips, if it's composted well, doesn't bind up the nitrogen in the soil once you apply it and slow down forage growth. And as long as you don't apply the composted chips too heavy, you don't seem to impact forage growth in terms of actual shading and smothering of the grass. This is a study showing 18 tons to the acre, 11 tons to the acre, and 4.5 tons to the acre. And really, if colors were better, the 18 tons to the acre is the lushest grass out there. So you're getting good nutrients, you're not tying up nitrogen, you're getting lots of good organic matter into your soil and improving forage growth as long as you don't apply it too heavy. A lot of people ask about costs. I think this is nearly my last slide here. You know, really the biggest variable in wood chip pad construction in terms of cost is what you do with the drainage water. If you can do a vegetated treatment area, it can be really inexpensive. If you do a waste storage pond that has a liner like we did in Waitsfield, the cost can skyrocket. So that's, you know, finding a site and assessing what you're going to do with drainage water is a really important part of the process, just for determining how much it's going to cost you. Excluding the waste handling, we've, you know, $163 per cow per full-size animal in West Virginia. Vermont, the last two we've built were right around $185 to $190 per cow. A little more expensive here, and this was a few years ago, this West Virginia number, which compares really well to what they do in the United Kingdom. And then just kind of showing costs of other types of winter management in West Virginia. Again, these roofed winter feeding structures were fairly expensive. They're really nice structures, but significantly more expensive than an outdoor solution.
Do you happen to have an annual cost for the wood chips? Because like, do you have an annual cost, or is this just an upfront cost?
Oh, no, we don't have an annual cost. So it could easily be calculated if it's a 3-inch layer or 4-inch layer of replenishment. I was talking to Brian earlier, and we're paying anywhere between $30 to $60 a ton delivered for chips, and his costs were in yards, so we don't really know how to.
It was about, I think $13 a yard, and then, you know, transportation on top of it, like, so, which being so close, I mean, it's 10 miles away, it was, really cheap.
Yeah. It's not something you should overlook, though, as a farmer. There's going to be an annual cost, for sure. But the good thing we noticed is that last winter or the winter before, where it was pretty warm, there was very little demand for heating chips. So people had a lot of heating chips and they wanted to get rid of them, and it was really cheap. So and if you buy them in the off season, you tend to get a pretty good deal too. So if you want to go buy chips in the middle of winter and all the schools want chips for heating, it's going to be a little pricey.
Yeah, we had chips from Henniker at a project in Massachusetts. It was actually in the northern part. It was pretty close to New Hampshire, but it was $22 a cubic yard plus shipping. So
Yeah. And I would say, like, I'm so close, you know, I think it was probably add another $1 a yard for delivery, you know.
Yeah.
100-yard loads. I mean,
Yeah.
yeah.
So Ireland, I mean, we're gonna have more trees in New England than Ireland does. So why is it more popular? Why are you think wood is more popular there than it is here?
You know, that's a good question. I mean, I think, well, it's just not something I think we're very familiar with, you know, and maybe that'll change. That's a really good question, why we haven't done this yet.
The drainage makes all the difference here.
The what?
Drainage, putting a drainage in subsurface. Of course, people who use wood chips for their open areas forever, but it becomes more dense.
Yeah, right. A large chip that's been screened so it does drain, and then an engineered drainage system really helps, yeah.
So you talked earlier about maybe more permeable soils, you would need a liner, and so you would use a membrane.
Yep.
Liner, and that still would be cheaper, obviously, than the concrete.
I don't know the answer to that. I'd have to price out a line. I mean, maybe someone knows price per square foot on liners.
I don't know, but
But
it
yeah,
still would be quite a bit more expensive.
yeah. The liners are not cheap, right. For example, that waste storage pond we built, if we'd have been in the county across the ridge where they had a lot of clay, we could have built the pond for a lot cheaper, but we had to put it in the liner because it was permeable alluvial soils, so the price went way up. I think it would be questionable whether, we'd have to just assess a site if there were really coarse soils, because it would be a, site-by-site
Give us a sense
assessment.
off the top of your head what clay content.
30% is what we're looking for, yeah, yeah.
And, I'm sorry, I want to tag on one more question related to the treatment, because you talked about, that's kind of the lion's share of the cost if you end up having to build a lagoon as opposed to a VTA. But we always think that the vegetated treatment area is not going to function in the winter because the ground is covered in snow. And that's probably the period when their heavy use area is going to be in use. So how does that work?
Well, so New York still, so some states will still allow vegetative treatment areas. And I think it's the way I look at it is I work with the wood chip pad system and then really rely on the experts in that area to determine what's going to work in terms of waste handling. And if they're okay with a VTA, then that's great. If they'd rather catch all the water and store it, that's the way we should go.
Nobody would rather store it.
Right.
I don't think anybody wants to do that, but in
Right.
practice, what happens to that water in the winter time when you're using a VTA? I guess that's my question.
Yeah, I think that ensuring that you have adequate setbacks is really important in that type of situation. But certainly infiltration is going to be reduced or eliminated in the middle of winter. There's also most of the runoff we see in these is in the shoulder seasons instead of in the dead of winter where everything's frozen.
And
So-
I think one of the encouraging things too is that the runoff is nutrient poor.
Yeah.
Versus what you get off a concrete HUA, what we're typically treating, which is really hot.
Yeah.
So the fact that the heavy use area is actually treating, the runoff in situ, I think is a really neat aspect of how these work. Where we do have this issue with how do we treat runoff, if that runoff is already pre-treated essentially, it takes some of the pressure off of what
So
we're
what do you guys do in New Hampshire for concrete where you need to treat runoff from a concrete lot or?
It's always a site-specific
Site,
head
yeah.
scratcher, really.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, it's the same I think it's gonna be the same with any of these, yeah. But you have a lower concentration runoff.
Back to the slide that had the concentration of nitrates in the runoff, was that sampling taken from the drainage water in that?
No, that was taken from the drainage system outlet.
Okay.
And I don't even know if I showed I pared back a bunch of slides on this, but
So,
yeah.
and has there been research done in the Northeast on the drainage water?
That was from a chip pad we built in West Virginia.
Okay.
Yeah, so not quite northeast, but
Okay.
close.
And do you get some heat generated in the pad from bacteria?
We think we do, yeah. I've been to the pads where we've had, not in the dead of winter, but when there's been a snowfall, and you'll go up there and there's, even a 6-inch snowfall on soil everywhere around the pad, and then there's no snow on the pad. And I think that might be related to composting action within the pad itself, generating some
Do you
heat.
think that the bark of the wood chips and everything in the pad is functioning aerobically or anaerobically?
I think it's aerobic. And I say that because it continues to drain. We've only seen, there was a period in Waitsfield, there was a 3-day period in April where it was the middle of mud season, there was a lot of freeze thaw and heavy rainfall, and he actually started to see cows start to sink a little bit in these wood chips, and he pulled them off. And I think at that point, it was probably anaerobic, but as long as it's draining, I think we're aerobic.
Air down into
Yep,
that
exactly.
comes out.
Exactly, yeah. Yeah. So, lots of advantages, still a few disadvantages. Really awesome to find people who are willing to give this thing a shot, and, NRCS New Hampshire for taking a chance on it too. We're learning all the time, but I do think it holds some promise, especially for small farmers. I just think it's a really kind of scale appropriate solution for some of our grass-based operations in the region. So yeah, that's all I have. I think it'd be awesome to get outside and take a look. I don't know what you guys have planned
Yeah,
next.
I don't
or-
know if, I mean, we've helped a lot of other people get started, and, you know, just having her as a backbone, and a reference, you know, for, you know, a lot of these different practices is, you know, stuff where she's helped us a lot. And, I know that even doing some of these research, because, you know, there's not a lot of information out there, period, on feed studies on buffalo, or, you know, why these animals are, you know, never feeling like they need shelter, you know, and, you know, whether it's the extreme hot or extreme cold, like, you know, Dottie helps us do a lot of, you know, research on stuff that's, you know, I think you found stuff from way back, right?
Yeah, I have been looking at buffalo for quite a while. As far as, you know, the projects here, first of all, you know, my job is really wonderful in the respect that I'm running into people who are doing things that I've never been exposed to before. And certainly buffalo are not something that I was. And so cows, from a cow background, you know, it was fun, actually enjoyable to learn the vast differences between buffalo and cow. And so dealing with these guys with this project was really, this project was a really good example of how different agencies working together can get something done that needed to be done. And you know, I mean, we've got Joshua from Vermont and the Department of Agriculture, and certainly Stacy Luke, she's around here someplace. I mean, there were many conversations that went on about this situation, and just people, I don't know, maybe just I had a lot of conversations with people, and that's how things ended up coming to fruition. And it's really beautiful when all the agencies work together, and you know, in clear up conversations that, you know, it helped a lot, I think. And so I've been exposed to, like I said, buffalo. There's a lot of people that are growing little, you know, 5 or 6 or whatever buffalo here and there. I don't know, you do sell a lot of buffalo, and people get them from you as breeders, or, you know, to the,
Yeah.
or I know that you do a lot of consulting with people that have buffalo, so, you know, they're a different kind of creature, and you know, the market is certainly there for them, and for their meat, healthy is definitely the way people are going, and they love the grass-fed aspect, and we've talked about rate of gain. Unlike cattle, in the wintertime, buffalo just, their whole evolutional system learns to just shut down, hunker down, and retain their weight and what have you. So there's no rate of gain in the wintertime. So that's why we're talking about light. They think that it's light related and that sort of thing. So there's a lot of interesting information that still needs to be done and is to investigate and to find, but people are looking at it, and it's just a really enjoyable thing to be able to deal with these guys and dig up information for them, and that's kind of what we do in this section, is dig up information.
Great. I really appreciate you being out there. So, you know, and actually, Damien has gone to the other side. He ended up, you know, he also was in the team, you know, UNH when we first got started, and, you know, and I would say, you know, I think you hit it perfectly, just saying, you know, they have a producer, we have all these great agencies out there, and this great network, but a lot of times getting them all to, you know, connect correctly, you know, both of you really help facilitate that, and that's how, you know, Damien got kind of involved, and now you're, and they're, what is?
I'm over at NRCS, yep.
Like, what are you doing?
Well,
He's
more.
a spy.
Yeah. No, I'm focusing more on grazing management over at NRCS, whereas with extension I was more broad, just livestock in general. So that's how I got wrapped into this and kind of got to dig into this a little bit more. And at that point, and then it just made sense once I transitioned over to just continue until the project was done and put together to kind of help see it through. So it's a really neat project, I think. And you know, from the NRCS perspective now, it's you know, the conservation innovation grants are the theory is to try out things that are maybe not being used here but are being used elsewhere and see how they work in this area. So and then maybe be able to incorporate it into some of the things that we allow cost share for in the future. So right now, you know, as Joshua had said, and you know, even you guys are saying, it's kind of we're kind of a wait and see. Okay, so let's see how this ends up working out, and so that's kind of where we're at on that. But it is a really neat design. I think it's really, you know, there's a lot of benefits to it that I'm excited to see how it works here. But
That's great. We're hoping, you know, one of the goals is, you know, this isn't a perfect system, like, but basically we're trying to take advantage and try to improve what we can, and then we're really still looking, you know, for a lot of guidance to say, okay, like, you know, this is, you know, this seems to be working pretty good, like, but where can we keep improving, and, you know, and just keep tackling it, you know, so, you know, some of these things, some of the vegetative treatment areas and stuff like that, and, you know, some of these other management, grazing plans, so like even, you know, how to, you know, work with other properties. It's all stepping stones, like, and, you know, I'm hoping that, you know, particularly this group, like, can help us keep moving forward, and we can kind of use it as an example for other farms to continue doing it, like, so that's what we're, you know, kind of hoping, so we're always open to criticisms and suggestions. And Stacy Luke's has been kind of in the background here all day long, like, and she's been also very instrumental to just kind of help coordinate some of this and kind of hold our hand through the process of you know, how to work with everybody. And so I don't know if you wanted to say a little about what you do.
So I'm Stacy. I'm from the Merrimack County Conservation District. And I guess it was several years ago now that I started getting phone calls from people from Dodd and Brandon Smith from NRCS about this project, and then just trying to find a way to figure out how to do this. And I think it was Brandon's idea to do the CIG grant, but the CIG grant requires a 50% match, and we're looking for more funds to do this. So the Conservation District wrote a moose plate grant in order to provide some of the additional funds for this. And which was just a perfect moose plate grant because it brought in all of these partners, which is what moose plate tries to do, and to conserve the natural resources. So that was where the Conservation District came in, and I was able to get that moose plate grant and then fund. I think it was the fencing part that it was funding. And I also suggested that they apply for the agricultural nutrient management grant. And Jennifer's here, so I didn't know if she might want to talk about this. I actually printed out some copies for people. But this is a smaller grant that farmers can apply for to try to get projects off the ground that tie together dealing with nutrient management and conserving water resources. So this was a kind of a good tie to that as well. And I think that was about where I was, and I helped out a little bit with the CIG grant because we had in the past received some CIG grants. So we actually currently have one as well. It's just a great grant to try to get things off the ground and started. So do you want to just quickly talk about this?
Sure, yeah. So the Department of Agriculture has a small grant for the Agriculture Nutrient Management Grant. What was kind of neat, it was interesting, I reviewed the grants for the CIG, so I got to review it on that end. I also sit and read all the grants for the Moose Plate, so I got to read it in that end, and then I got the grant for ours, so I got to read it 3 times. So it was very cool to see all these sources coming together because we're all rallying behind, like, this is a great project. So it was really neat to have those different perspectives. But the A&M grant is a nice small grant to help fill in those little pieces for farmers, especially smaller farmers, when maybe an NRC grant needs that match or the Moose Plate needs that match. And it's a little less restrictive and it's a quick turnaround. So sometimes it's the first step in a major project. We did just increase it this year to $5,000. It was always $2,500, and we decided instead of doing it twice a year, have it once a year, because $2,000 doesn't go very far anymore. So it's now once a year in the spring. I think April 1st is the deadline. 5,000 is the max. And we are working really closely with NRCS now because they're helping to fund that program this year, which is awesome. So yeah, if you have any questions about that, feel free to contact me at any time. Thank you for mentioning this again.
It was part of,
Yeah.
it's a great grant to do projects like this to get them started.
Yeah.
So, okay. I think that's
Right,
it.
thank you. Yeah, and just the A&M was also, I have to say, it was a great start. You know, initially, yeah. Sorry.
Now talk over that.
Yeah, just it allowed us to do a few of these projects like that. All, you know, we're realizing, you know, we're having some, you know, problems, and we'd like to address them. And it was just a very easy process to go through, and I think really for the money given forward, like it was probably really efficient, you know, with that money, and it was not an overwhelming task. Though I think you know, a lot of beginning people, like, it's a great place to start for bigger projects. I mean, just that any little help is huge. Like, so, because most of this comes right out of your pocket, but yeah, but hopefully in the end it works out for the best. So we appreciate that help, you know, over the years.